Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for joining us for one of our talks today. Today, we have the wonderful Ritu Arya to talk all about her latest Netflix movie, Red Notice. And I wanted to start by talking a lot about your character development process because it sounds like it's incredibly intrinsic and detail oriented, but then also that you shape it a little bit specifically to each character in each project. And I wanted to start by asking about the pass that you often do with scripts, where you go through and you kind of make a list of everything that the character says themselves, and then also all the details that other characters use to talk about them or describe them. And for Red Notice, how that helped to shape the initial foundation of who you wanted your character to be.
That's actually so nice to hear you speak so in detail of like the process. It's really nice and refreshing. And also, I don't know how you know that I do this work. So I must have talked about it before. So what was the question? So what I do after I've figured out everything my character says in the script.
Yeah, and then also how like the detailing of all the things that other people said about her, how that shaped the initial foundation and process of your character development in
Sure,
this movie.
sure. So I guess for me, um, a lot of it will come from, so yeah, I'll write down everything that the characters have said about me, or that said, everything that I say about the world. And so it gives me an idea of like the things that I like, dislike, my opinions, my relationship with every person, how that character is similar to me as Ritu or different. Um, and yeah, so that can help a lot. And also what things to start researching, you know? So um yeah, like making notes of just all the language I find just useful for clues at the beginning. And then I know exactly what's true and what's not in the script and what can be created by me as well. Is a really good starting point, I think, for most of my work. Yeah.
And with that part, when you're then making a list of all the things that you want to research, that can vary wildly per character and per role. And so for Red Notice, what were some of the specific things that you wanted to do? Because you've obviously got the aspect of playing a character who's an Interpol agent and who's incredibly dedicated to the work that she does, and figuring out a lot of the nuances of what that means for her, even beyond the language that then comes into play for her as a character in the script.
Yeah, well, a lot of I mean, I had to, research what Red Notice meant, what Interpol was. Like, I didn't know much about like this world, luckily. So I watched documentaries and like just Wikipedia a lot of like actually facts about what this is, and then from there went into more like detail. I suppose I was lucky enough to interview uh, an Interpol like officer and asked her sort of what her day to day was and like the riskiest things that she's been through and how she would maneuver through just certain scenarios. And that was just so useful. So I really based like a lot of like my own kind of character history on what this woman had um, gone through and how, specifics that you wouldn't even think would be in the film, but just made it so useful for me to just exist as that character. Like the issues as a woman, as an officer, like going through the ranks, trying to prove yourself when you're younger, and how to arrest someone and what she was scared of. And that was really useful. Um, and then also things that I thought with that, it's like how to be as confident as someone that is that character, and that I think took a bit of, okay, I have to put myself out of my comfort zone. So things like being cozy in my Uggs or going to yoga, I kind of changed to going to the gym. I would like work out a lot, and I went rock climbing to put myself like doing things that I haven't normally done. So I felt like I'll do scary things so that when I'm on set, this doesn't feel scary in comparison. I went to the gun range. I'd never held a gun before. And I was luckily shooting in Atlanta. So, they have that available. So I was able to, hold a gun and shoot a real gun before being on set, where by then, well, it was just blunt. So that was like nothing. So I felt super confident, which this character would be. Whereas Ritu is like, oh my God, what am I holding? So yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, and I love that you're bringing up aspects of the physical training because when you've talked about the physical training on Umbrella Academy that you did with Tommy Chang, it sounded like it wasn't just about the physical aspect, that it was very much also about the mentality and the psyche of the character, and that the physical training actually really helps you to find that space. And so for Red Notice, similarly, did you find that doing all those things like rock climbing and going to the gun range, that then just gave you a certain mentality and an internal psychology for the character that maybe you wouldn't have had otherwise or found?
Yeah, I think so. I think it helped a lot. It was also interesting because it was during like COVID and stuff. So I was able to do that just before we kind of went in. Well, sort of we were filming, and then we had a big lockdown break, and then we went back into filming. So this was, I think, just before we got back into it. So because whilst we were filming, it was just lockdown. So we were staying in a hotel, and we would go from the hotel to set and back. And we're in that sort of bubble. So all this stuff really was before being in that bubble. And yeah, so it was a really weird headspace to be in, because it was very hard to push myself out of my comfort zone. So finding things like that was very useful to hold on to get myself, in a mindset that was outside of the bubble of production. Yeah, you're asking about like mentally getting my head straight into it by doing physical stuff, and yeah, that helped a lot. And also like voice work, I think helps me a lot. I wouldn't be able to go on set without doing like a proper voice warm up. I felt like this character's very, she's not afraid to use her voice. And so that, I think, helped me find gravity, and this like groundedness in her that helped me with my state of mind to be able to match these crazy legends that I was working with.
But with the voice work that you're bringing up as well, it's one of those things where the very first moment that we see you in the film, you have this character that within an instant and within one line of dialogue has to be able to completely command the room, people that she's worked with and has a history with, people that are brand new to her, and really has to establish that sense of authority and power that she has in her job in that moment. And also the experience needs to come across as well, of like, this is someone that everybody really respects and trusts. And so how did you kind of land on what you wanted that specific delivery to be, so that when you come in with that very first line of dialogue, that it executes all of those things in such an instant?
You know what? I don't think I really thought about it being about in that first moment. I think that can put a lot of pressure on a first moment. So I've recently been doing a thing where I don't really look at the first scene or work on the first scene that I'm in. And that's a lot more fun. And you hardly ever shoot in sequence anyway. So I'll tend to just forget about that first scene. And hopefully I would have worked on the character with the clues and the ideas and the relationships and the world that they're in later on. And then that first scene kind of just happens. So yeah, I think that's what I've been doing. And that has been making it a bit easier for me.
No, I think that's such a fascinating approach to have, and it completely makes sense when you describe it that way. And I also wanted to ask about the tone of the movie, because it is an action comedy, and there's a real balance to achieving both of those things within the same space. And a lot of the comedy from your character comes from a slightly more straight space. But do you find that there's a challenge at all in figuring out, okay, we need to make all of the action scenes fully executable, fully believable, but we also need to be able to pull back from the seriousness of that and step into the comedy world because it is a film which is serving both of these spaces in every single moment throughout?
Yeah, it's interesting because I felt like I really wanted to bring lots of comedy. So I would try lots of different takes and like improv lines and things like that. And Rawson was really encouraging about it and would like give me ideas too. And so it was interesting watching the film and seeing what takes were used. And actually, he really chose all the sort of no nonsense, very straight, very sort of, I guess, natural. Not that, I don't know. Like, he didn't really go for like the light, funny, weird takes. I think he went for this is a really fucking, I don't know if I can swear.
You can swear it's the internet.
Um, suck. A really, yeah, he went for like the more kind of stern character. She means no shit. Um, choices. And all the comedy is just left to, Ryan and Dwayne.
Because you're bringing up there, the ability to rehearse and do a lot of different types of takes, did that carry through when you came back after pausing for the pandemic? Because obviously one of the things that really shifted was that ability to have as much time and as much close collaboration on set before filming a scene. And a lot of productions, it sounds like, were very much you had to just kind of find it in the camera in the moment. And what are some of the other ways that it really shifted it? Because it's also just things like not having as many background performers in scenes, and there were so many dynamics that really shifted during that time in productions.
Yeah, I think it definitely did something. It was interesting because, we all went through this together. So there was another level of bonding. To be honest, they were all so easy and lovely to work with. Like very generous and playful. And I think even if we didn't have that extra time to kind of sit and be a part of something for longer, it would have been fine. But because we did, yes, there were the three of them weren't working, with the background artists when we came back. So it meant that there was sort of a week where it was just me and Dwayne and no background artists. So that was, a really fun, like, great time on set where I got to, I guess, like spend some time with this guy who's just like, insane, like really, really lovely, cool, funny guy. But I don't think that I would have really got that chance otherwise. So, hey, some positives, you
And because it is something where Dwayne Johnson particularly has done so much work within the action comedy space, what are some of the things in working with him as a scene partner, and particularly having moments like that where there was so much intimacy in the way that you got to work with him, that you really were able to just observe and learn and take away from the way that he approaches his craft in that realm?
I think everyone works in such different ways. It's fascinating. And then you see them on screen and they just kind of glow. And I'm like, wow, they all have this magical glow around them. And I'm like, how do you do that? Give me some. So yeah, it was interesting watching him work. And it was more just like a real, just being present. I remember there was a take and we did a version and I was like, afterwards, I thought, there was an opportunity to do this really funny thing, even though, like I said, the funny bits that I thought, or funny things that I thought I did, really came into it. But I was like, oh, you know what I should do is when you hand me the egg, I should make, no, I think I hand it to him. He finds it heavy and I haven't. So I thought, oh, that's like, oh, a funny moment where I can be like acting like, well, I'm stronger than you and you're huge. But the moment had passed and I was like, maybe we should do that. And it sort of felt like learning that, no, like yield that idea like that's not being in the moment. Like that would have happened and that would have been great, but something else new will happen now. And that's just an example of how I thought that he was just like so present and free and unprecious, which I don't know if you can really teach. I just think that happens in life, right? And yeah, just like a generosity of spirit. And I think you can just see that. You can just see people's like essence, I think, on camera. You can't really fake it. And so I think it's like more just working on yourself, on like loving yourself and being happy and being able to contribute. And that can come across, I think, on camera, you know. Sounds deep, but here we go.
But it all pays off in the movie. And in working with Rawson as a director, from even what you were describing before about that ability to try a lot of different types of takes and try different types of comedy within scenes, it sounds like there was a real opportunity to have latitude with your character and really play around and try different things and see what worked, even if that wasn't going to be the final choice. And what's the way that he really worked with you to create that sort of latitude within the way that you approached your character in a lot of scenes?
There was no set way. I think he's a really like creative and playful, light director. It was so easy working with him. And often, you know, he might give a note like, you know, be more, I guess, you know, stern or a bit more like, I don't know. I feel like it would just be it never felt like any set way. So he'd be like, try one. He would be like, try one that's like 10 out of 10, like intense, and then a 5 out of 10 intense, and then a 3 out of 10, you know. So it'd be things like that in terms of action, reactions and stuff. And then in terms of like the acting, it might be yeah, make this one light, make this one more stern. So I think it was more about him just having things to cut with in the edit. And yeah, just very encouraging. I think that helps me a lot. And he seemed just like really open and articulate with and caring about his actors and giving notes and stuff. So yeah, it was he was so lovely to work with.
You've also talked about how sometimes with characters, one of the things that you do is a lot of animal association and animal work, where you're really using that as well to figure out a lot of the movement of a character. And in watching Red Notice, you know, there's a lot of very clear and decisive movement to your character. She has to come into situations, read the room incredibly quickly, make very decisive choices, and really stick the landing with the choices that she makes in every moment. And was that animal association something that you found useful for this character, or has it been more other projects where that's been a useful element of your process?
I think it can be useful to, as opposed to thinking of like what animal, but more about things like pace and weight and periphery. So I don't know if it can be like what a character's default is, and that can help me a lot. So for instance, someone like who is of, you know, Das's status, like heavier, like more weight, as opposed to like to Vicky and how I can be like touching my hair all the time and stuff. And it's like, you know, this person's not thinking about that. So that was sort of useful to think heavier. And in terms of I don't know, I think I just used a smart word about vision, but now I can't remember it. But if some, you know, babies can maybe only see to about here, and that's really present and so beautiful and alive. But then I think Darcy's vision is like being able to see everything really observant, because I'm trying to, you know, that's what makes her really good at her job, right? So if she's speaking over here, she also knows if someone over there is going to be doing something dangerous. And that, I think, is, a different kind of animal trait. So I think it's more just like less about like, I am this animal, but more just things like that can help me stay, just differentiate characters and um, enjoy sort of, yeah, the differences in characters I'm playing and differences between myself and similarities. And yeah.
Yeah. And in talking about Umbrella Academy briefly a little bit as well, I wanted to ask about whether you found working on a TV show and having a character that you're developing over the course now of multiple seasons, if that aspect of not just thinking about a character's backstory, but doing elements like writing a character diary day by day as they continue their narrative arc, if that's been a really useful tool on a show like that, especially given the trajectory and the journey that you've managed to take this character on over the last season. And I think you've already filmed the next upcoming season as well.
Mm. Yeah, I find that really useful to keep a diary every now and then of what my character's going through, especially when the scenes are jumping from here and there. I'll often just sort of have a splurge of what's going on in my mind before the scene, or just I always feel like it can bring some nuance or some depth somehow. And I like it because it's not sort of technical. I don't know how it might change anything, and if it even will, but it makes at least me feel like I've done something before, that is half the battle too, that I feel I need to work really hard to give myself the confidence to be able to just let go on set. So if that means, yeah, like just free writing in character of a time that's happened or what's just happened before, I can find that really useful.
And in playing a character like Lila as well, there's so many great moments that feel very unpredictable for her. And do you find that that really opens up the possibilities of what you can do as a performer in any given scene? Because it's not something where it's like, okay, this is absolutely the response that she would have, the action she would make, the choice that she would make. There's really about 10 different possibilities at any given moment of how she could respond and behave in a situation. And all of them would be believable for her character because of that element of unpredictability.
I think that's a really interesting question, because it can be such a temptation, especially when playing a character for like a series or more, that you feel like you know what your character would do, and yet we are all unpredictable. Like I might think me as Ritu wouldn't go, I don't drink that kind of drink, but then if one day I might, and there might be a reason behind that. And it's about finding the reason behind why this character is saying or doing this thing that you have told yourself, that's not like my character, So I think that's really interesting, because it can be tempting to think Lila would do something more interesting here, and actually, no, this is how it's written. And let me try and figure out why. And also less interesting, not just always like, one way, but why has the writer chosen this? I'll always try and respect and honor the writing. But then there's every now and then I'm like, I just think that, what if there was this idea or that idea? And I might suggest things, and hey, some of them, work and some don't, and I think that's all part of it as well, not being too precious, but being creative and feeling like the excitement for those ideas that come, and um, yeah.
And with the idea of movement with her as a character, what's so interesting about your performance is that there's so many moments where there's a real physical kind of like looseness and fluidity to her. And at the same time, there's also moments where the movement has to be incredibly precise as well, particularly when you're doing the stunt work. Was it very natural to find where you wanted to have that slight looseness physically and where you needed to kind of have that tightness for her in a character based on the circumstances that she's placed in each moment?
Hmm. I guess in terms of like physicality and gestures and things, it could I guess I think I like the idea of her being unpredictable and dynamic and uninhibited and unrestricted. So I'll often go, I think I'll try and think of what's contrary. Um, and yeah, also the dynamic of what other people are doing too might affect the kind of um, physicality of her. Like I know there's a scene where everyone's kind of still and we're all sitting down. I thought just to mix this up a bit, so I like decide that Lila is going to be upside down for this scene. You know, things like that that I think um, it's really just to do with on the day and what's around, and it's never like set. You know, I might feel like beforehand, oh, this is kind of a frantic scene because I'm thinking about this ahead of time, or I'm trying to cover up the fact that I really feel like this. So I'm, covering it up by doing lots of stuff. I'm playing with lots of things. And so there might be, choices. All, there's a reason behind it probably, but I think sometimes I'll think about it, sometimes I won't. And then also the director who's like, yes, do that. No, definitely don't do that. But I'll always try something, I think.
Yeah. I love that description and that way of it really being in the moment because I feel like in watching your performances in these projects that it always really comes across that way that it feels like everything is just very natural and organic to the characters, which is a testament to your performances. And thank you so much for taking time to talk about all of this, Ritu.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure to speak with you.